Hello and welcome. My name is Jake and I'm joined by Charlie as we discuss the world of football with a focus on data. This is Football with the Faff. Alright, so we've had the first week of Premier League action. We saw maybe a few surprises, but on the whole I feel it went as expected. We can start off with obviously your game, Man United Fulham. How did you feel it went?
Despite the negativity, I thought we played quite well. I thought Casemiro looked fit and lean, which is very, very different to last year, and a huge one. And the two players I've picked out, despite the lad that came on and scored the winner, I thought he looked good when he dropped in, but not really a big enough sample size to have an opinion yet. I thought Bruno was really, really wasteful in front of goal, which is very unlike Bruno. So the one where he had the goalkeeper one-on-one when I think Leno passed it out badly was a real surprise, because that is his bread and butter. I mean, Bruno created 1.2 XG, which is the highest for any midfielder in the Gameweek. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
And it's just so unlike him to be that wasteful. So I was really surprised by that. And the other one I picked out was Mainu, who I thought kind of added a little bit to his game, which had also helped Casemiro, in that Mainu's kind of known, especially at Man United, for how well he carries the ball. Casemiro does the dirty work and Mainu kind of brings the ball to the players that are going to make a difference. But Mainu actually made 3 tackles and 5 interceptions, which I can't remember him doing anywhere near.
No, I remember sort of watching the game and it felt quite pedestrian in a way. Like, there wasn't a ton of energy from either side. The midfield battles maybe weren't as exciting as you might have hoped for. And yeah, when I saw after the game all the stats for Mainu, I was a bit like, oh okay. He sort of went under the radar, I felt. But yeah, it certainly wasn't the best opening game we've had in recent years. But I felt you were probably just about right for the win. Obviously, you could have easily made it 2 with Garnacho's effort. Very late on.
Yes, yeah.
I'm sure we wanted to put that behind him as soon as possible. But yeah, I thought Fulham were a bit disappointing. They had a few breakaways. They had a few decent chances. Tete had an outrageous effort from outside the box early on that Onana managed to, I think, tip over. But yeah, I think you were probably just good enough for the win.
Yeah, I was disappointed in Fulham in centre mid, which I wouldn't say is the gap Palhinha's filling. I wouldn't, not necessarily off the ball, but on it. I mean, Pereira's been so instrumental in everything Fulham does. And I think him dropping deeper for Smith Rowe could be something to really watch for, because that, I'm sure, is a plan. I'm sure something that will happen for the rest of the year. It lets them play out a little bit easier if Pereira's receiving the ball from deeper. But I just think you lose a lot from him in terms of kind of direct assists, crosses into the box, and I'm not sure Smith Rowe really does enough for me to want to drop Pereira deeper. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when Sander Berge comes in, because that seems all but done now.
Yeah. I think that'll be a good signing for them, and you hope it will shore up their midfield and allow them to play the way they want to. I wasn't too impressed by Smith Rowe. Thought maybe we'd see a little bit more from him. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't expecting him to orchestrate the game, but certainly create a couple more chances. But look, it's still early days, and in 3-4 weeks' time we might see these teams be at their 100%, and they just might take a bedding in period to get there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, there are some decent players in that Fulham team as well. I mean, you look at the squad, you think they're going to do all right. You add in Sander Berge into that. I mean, Muniz looked fit and ready, although he didn't really get enough of the ball to do anything. Traore, I mean, always seems to flatter to deceive, but there'll be a team that he breaks down this year. It'll probably be Man City again. He seems to love playing them. But yeah,
Yeah,
no, I agree with you. I think United were a slightly better team, and again, Fulham were a decent team, so no shame in that. But
yeah,
certainly played at a pace that looked like the first game of the season from both teams.
yeah. And I guess the biggest positive you can take away from it is that your new striker scored. Getting off the
Absolutely,
mark, it's what you want to do. Okay, so let's now move on to Ipswich Liverpool, the 12:30 game. I watched that as well. Obviously, it was on TNT, and I I enjoyed that one more than your game. I felt in the first half Ipswich got a few more breakaways than I was expecting, had a bit more of the ball than I was expecting, and really sort of showed that they could be up for the fight, which you always want to see, is certainly from a team like Ipswich, where maybe most people would expect them to go straight back down. But yeah, in the end, I think sort of quality showed, and in the second half for sure, Liverpool grew more and more.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, I watched this one in the pub, so I have watched this back and delved into the stats. I don't think I was paying enough attention the first time round. But there was something that Carragher said on Monday Night Football that I'd written down as well, and then something I disagreed with. So the thing that he said yesterday was, it was interesting how, he didn't say this directly, but to kind of paraphrase it, how reactive Liverpool were instead of trying to set the tone. They were sort of seeing what Ipswich did and reacting to that. I mean, you see the sub at half time. Kwanzaa came off because he was apparently not winning enough duels to keep the manager happy. And there was a little clip they showed on Monday Night Football where Robertson went round the back of Van Dijk, and they were kind of playing a really, really narrow back four. And then Carragher showed how in the second half they spread really wide to kind of react to the way Ipswich were pressing. And that kind of backed up by a lot of other things. So Liverpool actually played the most long balls of the weekend. So that was more than Everton, more than kind of any of the relegation strugglers that you'd expect to be swinging the ball in a lot. And of them, 12 of them were from Robertson. Only one of them made the target, so whoever he was aiming at. And of Trent's, he tried 18 and only 8 came off. So it almost felt like they were, I don't know, reacting to how Ipswich were. And obviously it worked. They won the game and in the end won it quite comfortably. But I don't think they set out to go and launch the ball down the wings too often. It certainly didn't look like that at the start. And they kind of grew into that. I wonder if that will be kind of a running theme of Liverpool this year.
Yeah, and I think you look at their goals as well. They were much shorter, more almost routine passing plays, where it was like, right, I give it to you, then I make this run, and someone else also makes a run, and suddenly you're giving the defence more questions. And I feel that's really when Ipswich looked vulnerable, because in the first half I thought that although Liverpool's always a threat, they looked relatively comfortable. It didn't feel like they were getting overrun or anything. And then, I mean, just before the first goal goes in, Trent put in a great cross to Jota. He was about 6 yards out and he put the header wide. And at that point you go, oh, maybe it will be Ipswich's day. But then, immediately after, Salah's in down the right and just plays it square to Jota, who scores, and they just didn't really look back from that. I think, at the end of the day, Liverpool may struggle, but they've got that ruthlessness in them to just, cut a team off and just say, right, we're winning this. This is our game.
Yeah, I mean, you could say they have that ruthlessness in them. All they need is Salah, really, and that's kind of done. But yeah, the one other thing that kind of stood out from looking that I couldn't explain was Liverpool were the only team where the defenders made no tackles this week. And it wasn't that they looked comfortable. It wasn't that Ipswich were well beaten. I mean, Ipswich had their chances.
Yeah.
They hit them on the counter quite a bit. They were the only team where not one of their defenders made a tackle, which is I just thought was bizarre, and I couldn't really sit and think why. Because, like I said, I mean, Hutchinson had a few decent chances on the counter. Ipswich had a few set pieces. Yeah, just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, Delap was getting in a few times as well, and
Yeah.
I think, if you look at Ipswich's attacks, sometimes it was maybe a bit of composure or just maybe another body that let them down, and maybe as the season goes on, they'll grow in confidence and be able to go, right, we're not going to shoot straight away because we know that someone's going to make an overlap or something. But yeah, I think when you're the sort of weaker side and you're getting those chances, you've got to be trying to put at least one of those away because it will come back to bite you.
Yeah, and I think that might be the role, exactly what you described, that Sammy Smodics tries to take up, where it looks like you don't have enough bodies. He's so kind of box-to-box energy-wise. He can make it up there. And he's also a good enough finisher that anything in and around the box he's ready for. He's your kind of, you play a centre forward and you play Smodics with him to back up the midfield and the centre forward. It's like playing 4-4-2 with a number 10 and an extra holding midfielder. It's kind of, I think that could be a really interesting one for the Premier League if he comes to life, because he suits that role really, really well.
Yeah, for sure. I think, especially with his goal tally last season, and it'd just be nice to see what he really brings to the Prem. He'll be an exciting one to keep an eye on. Right. So let's move on to Arsenal Wolves. Boring game. Obviously Arsenal won 2-0. They were quite dominant. I had a magical portal that allowed me to view some of it. I saw parts of the first half, and then I've seen the rest of the highlights, but yeah, I felt it was quite sort of as you'd expect from Arsenal, really. Dominant, a lot of shots, and getting their goals at the end of the day.
Yeah, I have to say my kind of pick out for Arsenal this week was Havertz, and probably not in the way you'd expect, obviously goal scorer, but when I think of Havertz, I think as kind of false number 9, extra central midfielder that's bombing on up front. Havertz actually made the least passes of all the Arsenal players that played 90 minutes, and he had 5 shots, which was the most in the team. Are we kind of finally seeing Havertz really transition into being an out-and-out number 9?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he sort of tried in midfield last season, but when he played up front, his numbers just went through the roof, as you'd probably expect, but maybe not so much for him. And, there was talk of Jesus maybe being played because he'd been in pre-season. Arteta's been talking a lot about him. But I think if they're serious, they've got to use Havertz because he's more clinical than Jesus. I think he's a bigger threat. Obviously he's taller. And, yeah, as a sort of outlet, I think he can be perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I just find it interesting because I've always thought of Havertz as that kind of, he's never going to be a centre forward, he's never going to be a holding midfielder, he's kind of always going to be a real attacking centre mid or a number 10. And I just wonder now whether maybe they've bit the bullet and gone, look, we don't have the budget for a centre forward, or there's not one that we're desperately crying out for. Let's give Havertz a run playing there properly. We'll push Rice up, we'll push Odegaard up, Havertz play on the last man, and maybe they're going to see what happens. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's definitely one. It's something that they can exploit because of how much of the ball they have and how far forward their players can be. So as you say, they can push the other players up more. But yeah, it's obviously a painful one for me to admit, but they are just seeming like a better and better team each sort of game you see them. It's frustrating for me, and I hope that Villa absolutely smack them next week. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Wolves because although they were the worst side in the game, they did have their chances. Strun Larsen had a header sort
Yeah,
of crossed in, and you know, maybe he just needed a bit less on it, a bit more of a glance to be able to get it a bit wider into the far post, because Raya made a very good save to stop it, don't get me wrong, but you know, I think it was 1-0 at the time, and that could really just put some doubt in people's minds. And then later on in the game, I think Saliba gives the ball away to Cunha just
yes,
outside the
yeah,
box.
yeah.
And again, it's another poor finish, really. I mean, we say that a lot with Wolves, that you know they might be able to get chances, but it's actually scoring them that's often the problem. And I see that continuing to be a problem for them, to be honest.
Yeah, and my worry with Wolves is they kind of look light all over the pitch. They've obviously lost Kilman at centre back. They're going to lose. Well, they have lost Pedro Neto, and I read this morning that they were only going to have 20 million to spend to replace them.
God.
And I just think that Wolves squad plus £20 million worth of improvement still probably isn't as strong as I thought they'd be.
Yeah.
When I was kind of imagining how they'd grow. And yeah, I mean, Shun Larson is the kind of marquee signing for the summer for them, centre forward that needs to bring them goals. And like you said, he looked a bit timid. He snatched at a couple of things before the headers. I don't know. I'm a little bit more pessimistic with Wolves than I was last week. It's only the first game.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing as well. You know, I think a lot of first impressions get made, and you know, maybe in a month's time they'll be completely different. But for now, I mean, look, they're playing one of the best sides in the league, so you can, you know, cut them a bit of credit there. But I again just don't see how they're going to score enough to certainly be able to push towards the top half or get into the top half. I just don't see that happening.
No, neither do I.
Okay, so the next game up was Forest against Bournemouth. Ended 1-1, and obviously started with that horrible Danilo injury. I mean, yeah, it didn't look nice, and it's the worst way to start a season, so I doubt it, but hopefully he gets back soon as possible, because I think he could be a big miss for them.
Yeah, I mean, it was a real bore draw. I don't really have too much to say about either of them. I thought Bournemouth might impress a little bit more. Obviously, the new centre forward isn't in, and they've lost Solanke, so maybe that will help. There was a young centre back which seemed to impress everyone a lot. In terms of the other way, in Forest, Chris Wood scoring goals is always a good thing. If you're going to be in a relegation fight, you need your centre forward scoring goals.
It was a proper poacher's goal as well. Just, you know, reading, it was Yates who had the shot, and then just making that run to be there for when the keeper spills it. It's, you know, it's what you want your centre forward doing.
Yeah, but I mean, apart from that, it's kind of as you were. It was kind of everything I expected of Forest, and slightly disappointed in Bournemouth. But whenever their big money centre forward comes in, I guess that's when you start judging them.
Yeah. Oh God. I don't think many people were expecting fireworks, and it didn't really deliver that. And I'm quite interested to see how Bournemouth play against Newcastle at the weekend. It'd be quite a different challenge, I would have thought.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So moving on from them, we go to Everton-Brighton, which ended 3-0 to the Seagulls. I mean, what did you think of the game?
I actually did watch all of this, and I thought Everton were okay.
A 3 o'clock game, you watched all of it?
I had just come back from West Brom, and I was on the train, and yes, I had a magic thought, and I could just see it in my mind for 90 minutes. Yes.
So I have a magic portal. You have magic thoughts.
And I thought Everton were all right for a decent chunk of the first half, and then Brighton kind of hit them a couple of times, and the red card really killed Everton off. But what worried me about Everton was everything that they did was all right until the final third. And that's just not going to cut it again. I mean, I'll add a few more in. So Everton ended on the pitch with Calvert-Lewin, Iliman and Jai and Beto all were on the pitch at some point. They're three centre forwards. Not one of them had a shot, let alone any kind of XG, let alone a decent chance or forcing the corner. Not one of them even took a shot, which kind of says all you need to know. Don't get me wrong, they had 10 men, so obviously this kind of distorts it all. But I would say there was one standout player for me in the game, which again, when you're playing with 10 men, your centre mids are always going to look better because they're working in overdrive and they're going to end up getting more tackles, more kind of interceptions because they're doing the job of two people. But I thought the young lad, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name, but the young lad they signed from Villa, his first name is Tim, so I'm going to call him Tim.
Yeah.
He made 9 tackles for Everton, which, as far as I can tell, was the most of any player in the weekend. But he had that kind of Everton grit. He looked like he was up for it. He looked like he was throwing himself around and ready. He was brave. I mean, his pass completion was 58, so not too tidy on the ball. But I think he's one that the Everton fans are really going to like. And I know he's kind of in there because of injuries at the moment, but I think he will get a decent run out this season.
Yeah, I think it's always difficult with Everton because they've been so rocky for so long now, haven't they? And they do have some decent players. It's just, it feels like they're going to be in this grittiness and, constant battles for a while now. And I think as well, the fact that just after the start of the second half, they get a penalty, then it's overturned, which, I think it should have been.
It should have been a penalty. It should have been overturned.
Should have been overturned. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Calvert-Lewin just steps on his foot, and I think that would be really, really harsh to give as a pen. And then, a couple of minutes later, Welbeck scores Brighton second, and you think, oh, that could be the end for them. And obviously the red card as well just sort of cemented it, I think.
Yeah, and just a little shout out to Danny Welbeck. I just want to make sure this is true before I say it. So just give me 1 minute. There we go. Danny Welbeck has now scored in 15 consecutive Premier League seasons.
Wow.
Which is unbelievable. I know. So this weekend we had 2 records broken. Actually, we had 3. I'm not sure if Welbeck's is a record, but let's go out on a limb. So Milner has now played in 23 consecutive Premier League seasons.
Blimey.
Ashley Young is now the oldest player in the Premier League to ever be sent off.
Yep. Yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if this is a record, but as far as I can tell, Danny Welbeck has now scored in 15 consecutive Premier League seasons.
I feel like it must be really. I mean, 15 consecutive,
Yeah.
You think even players that have been around in the Prem for a while, they might have a year out somewhere. So, yeah, I mean, anyway, that's just an incredible feat to reach for him.
Yeah, and someone that's kind of never really been seen to hit the heights and had his really bad injury records. For someone that gets injured that often, a 15-season career at the top flight is really, really impressive.
Yeah, for sure. And look, he could be sort of big for Brighton in those moments where they do need a goal and need someone a bit different to come on, or whether he's starting. So I do quite like that Brighton have him, because I think he almost goes a bit against what they've often been about, bringing in these young sort of unknown players, and here you've got someone with a lot of experience who maybe aids that by saying, look, maybe I can anchor things a little.
Oh, I love the Brighton approach. It's a load of young players you've never heard of, and then at some point in the window they'll sprinkle it with a few 35-year-old plus pros. I mean, I saw they were rumoured for Mats Hummels a couple of days ago, and I just think that works perfectly to have all of these kids you've never heard of, chuck in Milner and Hummels, and we'll probably be all right. It ticks all my boxes. I love it.
Yeah. So Right, now moving on to the final 3 p.m. kickoff on Saturday. We've got Newcastle Southampton. Ended 1-0 Newcastle, but a fair bit of controversy in it, I think it's safe to say.
Yes. I think it's a red card, if I'm honest. I think regardless of how Ben Brereton Diaz, which he's added since he's decided he's Chilean, is going to overreact to, I don't think the reaction was decent, if I'm honest. But
No.
Fabian Schär should know better. I mean, that's poor. From a Premier League centre-back in his 30s, on the first game of the season, you don't get wound up like that. That's just poor.
Yeah, it was very stupid. I mean, the whole thing was strange because there's the ref blows for a free kick on like the halfway line. Schär's facing Pope, he's stopped with the ball, and then Brereton Diaz just runs into the back of him, which you go, okay, and then obviously Schär retaliates, pushing him, and then sort of pressing foreheads, I guess, because it's not really a headbutt, but.
No, I think Ben Brereton Diaz also does move his head into him, but I think the difference is Schär moves his body into him. Schär kind of leans the whole way, whereas Diaz kind of goes to head.
Yeah.
But either way, I mean,
he doesn't want that reaction.
Yeah, I mean, this would be Diaz's. I mean, he wouldn't have even had 20 appearances in the Premier League. Fabian Schär's been at Newcastle long enough now. You're a Premier League player, first game of the season. You don't let your team down that way. I mean, he's very, very fortunate that they all banded together.
Yeah.
I was really surprised that Schär did that, and I do think it's a red card, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I think I often say, like, look, you're at the top level of English football, so if you're getting wound up and you're retaliating, you deserve the punishments that come, because you should be able to control yourself. You should be able to say, no, I'm better than that. Let him get booked, and you will call a fine. And then Southampton didn't help themselves with McCarthy threw the ball to Isak, and then he just crosses it in for Joe Linton to tap away. And then, to be fair, Southampton had a lot of chances. They did keep coming at Newcastle with the man extra. That probably wouldn't have happened otherwise. But yeah, they couldn't break them down, and I don't know. It doesn't give you much hope for Southampton, really. If you've got a man up for that long, and not only do you concede in that time, but also you just fail to have too many shots on target. A lot of them were going over. I just think it's one where you need to take something from.
Yeah, I really like Russell Martin, but I worry for Southampton again. I don't want to be kind of spinning the same narrative as everyone else, because it's just too easy with Southampton. But you can't get over the fact that if you're going to play out from the back to such an extreme level and you just don't have the players to do it, it's going to cost you points. And when you're at the bottom, you can't be affording to throw away points like that. I totally get that's what their football's built on. That's what Russell Martin does. He's not going to change. Good on him. Really love that. But if you're going to do that, you need some better players out the back. I mean, you can't be playing out the back with 30-plus-year-old Alex McCarthy, who's been relegated a couple of times and started last season as second choice in the Championship.
Yeah.
We saw it with Burnley last year. If you don't have the players, you're going to go down. And I don't see any way out for Southampton. I'm sure they'll put up a good fight. But again, they had so much of the ball. Like you said, so many decent chances. But you need the players. If you're going to play that way, you need top players at both ends of the pitch. And it's not their fault that they can't afford that for the Premier League. They're not an enormous club. They can't spend like City and Arsenal. If you're going to play that extremely, you need to buy the players that can do that at the top level. And it's not their fault that they can't afford that.
Yeah. I as you said, I just don't see them having enough to stay up. Is certainly playing that way. I should point out that Armstrong did have a shot that was cleared off the line by Hall, so it wasn't like they were a million miles away. But again, being a man up, you should be able to impose yourselves, and again, just take a draw. That's still not amazing, but at least it's something. Whereas
you'd have snapped your hand off for a point away at Newcastle first
Yeah.
game of the season, no doubt. Yeah.
But yeah, so I think a bit of a disappointing game based on maybe what was expected before the start. But
Yeah, the red card killed it.
yeah. So let's move on to West Ham Villa, the evening kickoff. Ended 2-1 Villa. I mean, Villa scored within, was it 4 minutes from a corner? It was shambolic defending. Onana was completely free.
I've watched it back, and that is Antonio. Antonio just switches off. He's his man. I know they're doing a zonal and blocker thing, but Antonio just literally watches him. He's holding him, watches him, and lets go of him. It's dreadful.
Yeah, I saw that and thought, oh, maybe nothing's changed at West Ham. They've made all these signings. It's like, oh, okay, maybe they're finally trying to put their foot down, but you can't start a season like that, let alone a game.
I'd actually go the other way, and I'd say I think that was perfectly summing up how there is a new change in the guard from Moyes. I mean, you think of Moyes, you think sitting off teams, strong in the set pieces, kind of route one direct football. And I think West Ham on the weekend were everything other than that. I mean, West Ham had more of the ball, conceded from a really sloppy set piece, which you can't imagine they'd have let happen under Moyes. And West Ham actually made almost double the tackles that Villa did. It was a proper change in the guard where West Ham are having more of the ball against the top kind of team hunting for Europe, and the goals they conceded were sloppy. The goal they conceded was a sloppy set piece goal. I thought, from what I watched, I thought Villa were okay. John Duran looked sharp, and he's going to stay. Yeah. But other than that, it was kind of how I expected. Yeah, Villa's quality showed through. But I was interested that West Ham, I think, really have totally changed the way they're going to play, and certainly are on that.
Yeah, and you had that chance with Bailey where he rounded the keeper, very tight angle, and hits the post. And I think Rodgers had a sort of driving run through the centre, but then had a poor shot at the end. So I think Villa wasn't as good as they'd want to be, but there were some decent signs where maybe on another day they go 2-0 up and maybe coast a bit more.
And just a little shout out for the XG in that one as well. I was sitting with my dad looking after, and it said that West Ham had quite a considerably higher XG. And you'd sit there and you'd think, oh, well, maybe West Ham created the better chances. Maybe they were unlucky to lose. And there were two things we forgot. 0.8 of that XG was a penalty, which absolutely frustrates the world out of me. And pretty much all the other bits of it were made up of Souček's header that got cleared off the line, and then Souček's shot that he missed at the end. So no, West Ham didn't create the better chances. They had a penalty and created one chance at the end that was a really good chance.
And both shots from were off target. So
exactly.
It's always a dodgy one. I felt Matty Cash was a bit unlucky with the penalty.
That wasn't a penalty. Yeah, I thought it was. Watched it back. It's not a penalty.
Yeah, it just feels like a tangle of legs. They come together. It's one of those things where, players collide, but they're both sort of taking out each other almost, and then they're not attempting. They're just going for the ball.
In the same action of the leg tangle, he got the ball out. It's not a foul. It's just not. Yeah, I thought that was poor.
Yeah, and it's again another shame for the game to go like that. Let's move on to Sunday's games now, where we had Brentford Palace. Maybe a little surprise for a few people. Tony obviously wasn't in the matchday squad because he's looking for a move away, but it ended 2-1 to Brentford nonetheless. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I thought the game swung a little bit. I thought it was certainly distinct periods of dominance. I thought Palace were very, very much a better team, and then suddenly Brentford were very much the better team. It really swung with no middle. One of the interesting things I picked out was Eze had 7 shots. It didn't really feel like that. And then, yeah,
Does that include the one that was ruled out for the free kick?
It does, yeah, which is unbelievable. Yeah, less said about that, the better. But yeah, Mateta didn't look sharp. He looked leggy. I know he came off at half-time.
I'm not surprised about that, though. He's just come back from the Olympics. I was surprised to see him start, to be honest.
I agree.
I know he was big for them towards the end of last season, but he's got to have a break.
Yeah, and I mean, it'll be an interesting end to the window with Palace because it's not just Eze now. It's whether they keep hold of not Eze. It's whether they keep hold of Gahey and Anderson. But to be fair, Eze could go too. I mean, it's a big end.
There's been talk about City wanting Eze, and I'm sure they could get him.
Yeah, well, my little tip is I think City are going to go for Mohamed Kudus.
Yeah, I mean that would, make West Ham fans cry. He's certainly their most flashy player.
Well, with the way they're going, they'll get a decent amount of money for him and sign another 10 players before the window ends. But yeah, that's my tip. I think it'll be Kudus.
Going back to Brentford, I thought their first goal was quite good, and Mbumo cutting in on his left and sort of firing across goal, and that was shortly after the free kick got ruled out. So again, it's another moment where suddenly the momentum completely changes, and unfortunately it was the wrong decision, but then you look at Brentford's second goal. Again, it's almost like sort of Chris Wood. It's that knowing where the danger is, even if you're not having the shot or whatever, but being in the right position so that you can cause chaos. And obviously Henderson had nowhere to push the ball out to, and pushed it literally onto Wissa's foot. Yeah. I did find it a bit of a shame for Palace. They weren't at their sort of roaring best, but I think Brentford played quite well, so probably did deserve it.
Yeah, can't disagree with that really.
Okay, so let's move on to Chelsea Man City, where I think Man City played the game quite comfortably and ended up winning 2-0.
Yeah, again, not really that much to dig into. It was fairly boring. I mean, Haaland had the least passes that any player has had for Man City since Pep Guardiola came in a 90 minutes. So yeah, I think it was something like 3 passes in 90 minutes, and they just walked it. I mean, how worried do you have to be for the rest of the league if they're playing a team that are going to hunt for Europe without Rodri and Foden? And walked it. It's killed my spirit for Arsenal potentially winning the league.
It's made mine a lot better.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot to say. I mean, Chelsea's a million players. They've got to find their feet eventually. Cucurella was poor. I thought he dived in a couple of times, and that pains me to say because I love Cucurella. Yeah, about what you'd expect. City walked it. Chelsea looked a bit out of place, and that was that.
I think my highlight of the game was seeing Bowley get up and leave early, probably to sign a few more players.
That's criminal, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, part of me thought, is he going down to the dressing room to talk to them all?
He was probably trying to bring himself on.
I mean, I'll give credit to Haaland for his goal. Just sort of powered through, and then a nice little dink over Sanchez's leg, and then of course Kovacic scores against them just to rub the salt into their wounds even more.
Yeah, and I thought the Kovacic goal was poor goalkeeping.
Oh yeah,
I was really surprised. Yeah, but
yeah.
yeah, look,
I mean, it goes through his hand.
yeah, a hard one to dig into because kind of I have to admit I think that was exactly what everyone thought that game would be, and the showpiece on Super Sunday was it was just a flat game, really, wasn't it?
Mm. Well, it's what always happens when it's like, oh, two of the richest clubs are going against each other. We're gonna put a million promos out for this, and it's just like, like even I think 10 minutes before the Brentford Palace game, they were showing off the City Chelsea game, and I was like, well, why? You've got another game that's literally about to start, and yet you're promoting a different one. It is frustrating, and obviously the Brentford Palace was the more interesting game, but yeah, it went how people expected. Chelsea are all over the shop, and City look like they could dominate again. So everything's going as normal. Right. So then, obviously, last night there was a game. Obviously, it was Leicester Spurs. Ended 1-0 to Spurs at half time. And then obviously it didn't end that way at full time. I thought we did start well. I liked how dominant we were. We were keeping them in. I think we had about 6 corners in the first 15 minutes or so. Benton could have flicked one on. It got cleared off the line. Romero had another one that just went wide. Solanke had a couple of chances, and then obviously Maddison puts in a lovely little cross to Porro, who sort of shoulders it in, I guess.
Yeah, fantastic finish from a fullback. I know it kind of flicked off his shoulder, but what a run, and yeah, well done.
Oh yeah. That's the nice thing about having these sort of inverted and just sort of attacking fullbacks. It allows them to pick up spaces that the defence might go, okay, we've got the front 3 covered, but then suddenly there's an extra one. And then you've got Maddison on the ball, able to view it all as well. Yeah, I was quite happy with it. And then we did have some chances that we really needed to put away. We had a free kick, Maddison to the far post, and Brennan sort of gets it, plays it back across goal, and Son's just not close enough to be able to tap it in. That was a really frustrating one, and obviously it ended up costing us, as it often does. But what did you make of it as an unbiased viewer?
Yeah, I thought you lot were all right. I thought Solanke looks like he really needs a goal. I get the horrible feeling he's going to end up in a similar situation where he was first at Bournemouth, where he's going to look like he does everything right and just doesn't score. So he needs a goal. I thought Porro looked dangerous. I thought the goal was a really bad one to concede. I thought that from Romero is unforgivable, because I'm a big Romero fan, really like him. Yeah. He has one man to mark in the box, and he just walks straight past him. I mean, it's terrible defending.
And as well, he was the only one keeping him onside.
Yeah, I mean, so that goal is unforgivable.
Yeah, but that has often happened with us, where when there might be a couple of players in the box and the centre-back will just go to the one in front because you go, oh, the ball will get to them first. But, if it's,
but they both did.
That
was the issue. Yeah, they both did.
And then obviously the right back's got to go, oh, do I go in tight? But then there's someone spare out wide. So it does cause a problem, but you just need to... I think as well with that goal, there wasn't enough done to prevent the cross. Like, if you see the cross coming in, Udogi's not really making it much of a challenge.
Yeah,
so
that's fair.
I think sort of all over there could be improvements. I felt the substitutes were a bit late in the game. I was expecting, to be honest, for there to be a half-time sub of Kulusevski on for Johnson, just because Ange often makes half-time subs.
Yeah, I thought Son was really poor as well. I really like Son, but I thought he looked poor.
he had some moments where he got in behind, but then it was just trying to find the ball into someone that he struggled with. And obviously, it was really sad to see Bentancur get that horrible injury. And I mean, I don't even know how long he'd be out for, because it was a serious concussion, obviously. But
Yeah,
hopefully,
I think with Bentancur, I've said this a while ago. I just don't think he suits any position that Ange wants to play.
to be honest, I thought he did quite well the first half. He seemed to sort of patrol the area quite nicely.
I think it will be very telling with Archie Gray. I think. What do you think on that? Do you think he'll come in for Bentancur, or do you think he'll shape something around? Do you reckon Basuma will come back? What do you reckon?
That's the thing. I think Basuma would have been starting if...
Really?
I think so. Bentancur didn't really play that position in pre-season. Obviously, he was away the Copa America for a lot, but he's not adopted that role too many times, and I think Basuma would have been seen as the more familiar fit, certainly to start the season. But I'd love to see Archie Gray. I'd love to see Bergvall more. I think we've got some really exciting young players. I'm not saying that they're ready to start games or anything, but I think that as the season goes on, we'll see more and more of them. And we might be seeing Jed Spence start, because Porro picked up that injury towards the end of the match as well. So, it could be a bit of a different team. We've got Everton next, so potentially you can afford to have a bit of a mix-up. But we'll just have to wait and see. Don't get me wrong, I'm not thrilled with the performance, obviously, because as Ange said quite openly afterwards, you can play all the lovely football you want, but you've got to score. You have to put chances away. And I mean, that's been a problem since I started watching Spurs all those many moons ago. But I'm certainly not saying that the team isn't good enough or anything, because I think they are. I think they can improve as well, don't get me wrong. And yeah, I'm just quite excited to see what happens this season. I think we've got a good group of players, a good group of youngsters that can get in as well. And, let's just see what happens.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The one thing I'd add is I thought Big Ange looked defeated in that press conference at the end. I think he was ill, to be fair, because he kept coughing. But he
does cough a lot, though.
he looked so down. He looked defeated. And
I saw Son do an interview as well, and yeah, it was sort of the same. I think, again, when you have... I think we had like 73% possession, and we had more successful crosses in the first half than any other team had in 90 minutes in the other games. And it's just like, you're making chances, maybe not clear cut where it's, you have to be scoring, but I think Solanke probably annoyed not to have scored one of his chances. Again, the one where Son just needs to be on his toes a bit more to get on the end of Brennan's shot cross, whatever it was. Yeah, it's just a few little things like that.
There was one that flicked up off Maddison's foot as well when he was chasing the ball, and it got smashed at him, didn't it, from the goalkeeper? Yeah, I know what you mean.
I'm not... It's not all doom and gloom, but at the same time, some improvements do need to be made. And as well, at the weekend, we could use Odeber, our new signing.
That came out of nowhere, didn't it?
It did. Yeah. It was really refreshing, though, to just be like, oh, it's a signing, and not have to wait for like a month. It was really nice. I'll be interested to see how much he plays, because I don't know. It also might depend on if any other wingers leave or whatever. Because there's still a few weeks of the transfer window left. But yeah, I'm excited to see him play. Obviously, he's young as well, and looks to be quite a good sort of technical player. And yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the nice football we play, but I would also like a little bit more clinicality, if that's a word. Just to top it off, because although we were comfortable, I'm always terrified when the other team attack, because again, I've just seen it too many times where Spurs are winning or look fine, and then suddenly it's like, oh, we've conceded, oh, we're losing, oh, it's all gone wrong. But yeah, I still feel we're sort of on par for where I see us this season.
Well, happy days. All right, I'll get you to pick one little either moment, player, or game of your kind of star of the weekend. Something you enjoyed, and that can either be a whole game, one particular player, or just a moment in a game. What's your star of the weekend?
Star of the weekend. God, that's tough,
It doesn't have to be Spurs related. It can be any team.
It won't be. Well, one last thing I will say on the Spurs game. So last season we started with a draw, an unconscious player, and concussed player. I don't think Romero was unconscious last season, and our right back scoring, which was the exact same as yesterday. So a little bit funny. I mean, well, I think if I give it as a sort of team of the week, I'll go with Brighton, because I know obviously Everton had the red card, but I just felt Brighton were better. They really did impress me. I wasn't too sure how they'd start, but I mean, if they can continue like that, I don't see them having any troubles at all. But yeah, I quite liked, as I said, I quite like Brentford as well. I thought they played a bit better than I thought, or than I expected even. Without Tony, sometimes there might be a bit of a mist of negativity over the club where one of your big players suddenly isn't in the squad. They're trying to get him move away. It just lowers the atmosphere, but they were still going for it, and fair play to them. I'm trying to keep a bit reserved still, because it is just the first game week. You don't want to go too crazy. But I feel like those two teams, maybe people didn't expect too much from them. Maybe Brighton a bit more. But yeah, I was impressed. Well, what about you?
If we go in team, I think I'd have gone with Brentford as well. I didn't see that one come in, I have to say. If I'm going with player, I'm obviously biased, but I think I'd have to go with Xerxes scoring on his debut. That's obviously a huge one, yeah. But yeah, I think team, I'd probably be going Brentford.
Yeah. Okay, nice. Now, I wondered if you wanted to do some predictions for next weekend. Obviously, it's only 2 days of fixtures this weekend. Quite nice, quite concise. 4 games live on TV, at least in the UK. Everywhere else, it's pretty much every game. But we start off again with your boys away at Brighton, the 12:30 kickoff.
Yeah, so I've gone with us to win 3-1. I think our first home game was really cagey. I expect us to come alive a little bit more. I do expect us to concede, because I think we've got one in us. But yeah, I hope the quality will show through. We've obviously had Eric a little bit longer than the Brighton manager's been in. But Brighton tends to be a place where we just sort of implode. We've been whacked by Brighton a couple of times before. But yeah, I'm going with an optimistic 3-1. What are you going with?
I'm going semi-boring. I've gone with a draw, but a 2-2 draw. Because I can see it going either way, really. Or a draw, obviously. But I just think, Brighton impressed me. You've got quality. You've got the players going. And again, I don't think you played amazing against Fulham, but I wouldn't be surprised if you did get a win against Brighton. So, yeah, I think it will be, or it should be, a good game to watch. And, hopefully it is exciting.
Yeah.
And then next up we have Palace against West Ham. Now, obviously 2 sides narrowly beaten this week. Had chances to get a draw or maybe more. There we go, nice rhyme. But yeah, what have you gone for that?
I've gone with a 0-0. I've gone with two teams that are going to try and play the ball, going to try and attack, be on the front foot, and I think neither of them are going to score. So I'm going to go with 0-0.
I've gone with a 2-1 to Palace. I think
Oh.
that it'll be tight, but I think Palace will be able to get the edge at home over West Ham.
Very nice.
And then next up, it's Fulham at home against Leicester.
Fulham Leicester, yeah. I've gone with 2-1 Fulham. But I have to admit, I did that before last night. So I'm not. I thought Leicester would be a little bit poorer last night. But yeah, I've gone with 2-1 Fulham. I think Fulham have a decent team. Certainly a better one than Leicester. Yeah, I've gone with Fulham. What have you gone with?
I've gone with the same, funnily enough. Yeah, I think, Leicester last night, they were a bit Jekyll and Hyde, but opposite to Spurs. The first half, I thought they were really poor. They just obviously they kept the score low, but they didn't offer much going forward or anything. And I thought, ooh. But the second half, they showed that they can have some belief. They can get forward. They can punish teams. So yeah, I think 2-1's about right for them.
Yeah, no, I've gone the same.
And then Man City Ipswich, I've gone with a bit of a whopper scoreline of 4-0.
I've gone with 5. So there you go.
Oh, 5! Wow, you're a bit more pessimistic for Ipswich, but optimistic for City.
Yeah, I don't really know what to guess. I just think City are too good for anyone, and anyone that hasn't quite got the players to compete with them, I think they're just going to destroy.
Yeah, I think, if they have Foden and Rodri back and Stones, Walker, whoever, it could be a bloodbath. Then after that, it's Southampton at home against Forest. So sort of, it could be a big game in the relegation battle.
Yeah, I've gone a bit bold, and I've gone 2-0 Southampton.
Ooh.
I wasn't that impressed with Forest, and I think a team that are going to keep a lot of the ball and kind of drag Forest out. I think Forest are lazy, have mistakes, don't concentrate very well for 90 minutes. So I think this could be a good game for Southampton. I think it's a good team for them to play.
Yeah, I've gone 2-1, so quite similar, and for similar reasons, obviously. I just think that maybe Forest can snatch a goal. They've got some quality in Callum Hudson-Odoi. They've got obviously Chris Wood up front, might just be able to snatch another. But I do think that Southampton will come out on top.
Yeah.
And then next it's Tottenham against Everton. So obviously disappointment for Spurs, tragedy for Everton really. They're bottom of the league. Getting a red card first game of the season isn't going to boost the self-esteem of the players, but how do you see it going?
I've gone with 3-0 Spurs. I think Everton are in a bit of trouble, and I don't see this being the game they kind of come to life, especially away, isn't it, at Spurs?
Yeah, Spurs playing at home.
So yeah, I just don't see it. I think 3-0 Spurs.
I've gone for 3-1, so again, a little bit similar, but we just always find a way to concede. It's not that I don't think the defenders are good enough, it's just that we always just, something happens. And yeah, but I do expect us to be able to control the game, to be able to dominate, and hopefully put a few more away. And then the final game on Saturday, it's a big one. Aston Villa at home to Arsenal.
Yeah, I've gone with 1-1. Villa were kind of what decided Arsenal's title downfall last year, and I feel there are going to still be some nerves there. I think Villa are good at making a game cagey when they want to, and although Arsenal won, they were a little bit sloppy. I mean, they were better than Wolves, but
yeah,
I'm going to go with 1-1.
I've gone with 2-1 Villa. Definitely not biased or anything. Definitely not what I want to happen. But yeah, I think it could be, sort of Arsenal's sort of nightmare ground. They've struggled before. They didn't look themselves last season when they went there, and I think maybe again Villa could make them uncomfortable. But it's the start of the season, so there's not going to be fatigue, or there shouldn't be. It should be a fresh Arsenal going against a fresh Villa. Obviously, on paper, you'd choose Arsenal, I think, but I just feel that Villa can really do one over on them again this season.
Yeah.
And then moving on to Sunday, we have Bournemouth at home to Newcastle. So two sides that maybe didn't get off to the starts they wanted to. A little bit disappointing. Obviously Newcastle won, but it's not how they would have wanted to win.
Yeah, and I think that red card for Cher makes it tougher because they're already quite short at the back. Even if they signed Gahey, I can't imagine he'd be ready for Sunday. Well, maybe he would be ready for Sunday, but I don't see it. I've gone with 2-1 Newcastle. I think they'll concede, but I just think they're a little bit more going forward than Bournemouth. But again, yet to see how this new Bournemouth centre forward is going to do.
Yeah, I've gone the same. I've gone 2-1 Newcastle. It's tricky, obviously, with Cher out, but I feel like they'll have enough. I mean, Isak, you can never really, cross off. He's always a threat, and I don't know if Bournemouth have enough going forward to be able to really dominate or put more than one against Newcastle.
Yeah, no, totally agree.
After that, it's Wolves at home against Chelsea. Could be a bit of a ball to watch.
Yeah, I've gone with 1-0 Chelsea. I just think they have the better players, and I don't see Wolves scoring any goals at the moment. I think something has to change there. I don't think Chelsea are fantastic, but I see them having enough to beat Wolves.
Yeah, I've actually gone 1-0 Wolves. Again, not biased. But I don't know. I just have some faith in Wolves, and Chelsea. Chelsea have so many talented players. You'd expect them to brush Wolves aside easily, but they just looked all over the place against City, and obviously it's City, but still, even in the simple parts of just passing it to each other or moving for each other, they just couldn't do that. They were not on the same wavelength at all. So I think that Wolves will be able to do something at Molineux. And then finally, we end with Liverpool at Anfield against Brentford.
Yeah, it pains me to say it. I've gone with 3-1 Liverpool. I think Brentford have a decent amount in the air. I can see them getting one from a set piece, but I just don't see them holding out against Liverpool. So yeah, I've gone Liverpool to win, but Brentford to score.
I've gone the exact same, 3-1. Liverpool look like a real threat going forward, even if it again takes them a bit of time to really sort of get their hold on the game. But I think they'll just blow them out of the water, really.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was our predictions for the upcoming weekend, and well, hopefully they're all right. Thank you for joining us. A like and a follow is greatly appreciated, and don't forget you can rate if you're listening on Spotify. This has been Football with the Faff. Goodbye.